Assalamualaikum, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle Seerah Sessions, HISC. We're on 107 of the Prophet ﷺ's life, and it's our fifth session on the Battle of Uhud. We'll inshallah continue with where we left off yesterday, or last week. So we've got a few other instances and things that happened in the first phase of the battle when the Muslims were in the supremacy, and then we'll talk about how the tide changed. Obviously everyone knows the famous story of the archers deserting their post, and then essentially what that meant for the Muslims. And then we might, if we have time inshallah, talk about some of the initial fierce battles that happened once the tide turned. And then perhaps next week we'll talk more specifically around the attacks on the Prophet ﷺ and some of the other stories related to that. Last week, just to recap, we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ, he motivated the fighters before a battle commenced. He got his sword out and said who's going to give the sword its rights, and then Abu Dujana stuck his hand up, and then he fought bravely with that. We then talked about how Abu Sufyan, as leader of the Quraish, tried to inspire his people. So the discussion he had with Bani Abdul Dar about them keeping the standard aloft, and then when the battle was about to commence, when they're facing off, Abu Amr al-Fasiq, he tried to sort of convince his tribespeople, but they sent him back. And then they were sort of chanting on both sides, and then Talha bin Abi Talha, who's known as the ram of the battalion of the Quraish, he was struck down in the Mubaraza, the duel before the battle. And then we talked about how all 10 of the people of Bani Abdul Dar, who were keeping the standard aloft for the Quraysh, they lost their lives, and the heroics of people like Abu Dujana. Then we also looked at the map of the lay of the land, and probably again we'll need to go through that again today, because again it's just important to sort of reiterate the how the battle unfolded. So I've got the map again. I didn't rub it off. I'm not sure how much is visible there. So there we go. Okay. So the initial face-off is here. So there's Mount Uhud. That's the Jabal Ruma, the Mount of the Archers. The Muslims are camped here, 700 or so of them. At the rear of that, you've got Prophet ﷺ with his camp, whether it's here or just over here, but he's protected, and he's got a good view of the battlefield. The Muslims, here's where the duel happens, and then the archers are protecting this flank, which is the left flank of the Muslims. They're facing off 3,000 of the Quraish. You've got Khalid bin Waleed on the right side with his cavalry, Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl on the left, and Abu Sufyan leading the main bulk of the army. But the topography means that the fighting needs to sort of happen in this area, and it's led by the Muslims charging through. Right at the rear, you've got the women camped, and then there's other mountains over here. And then what we did in terms of how that actually panned out. Oops, here you've got the other side, or what happened later on. So essentially, the Muslims, they charged through. They broke the lines of the Quraysh. So the Quraysh basically, apologies for the shaking, the Quraysh essentially scattering everywhere in a very haphazard way. And then the archers, when they see, because they've got the best vantage point essentially, so when they see that the Quraysh army is all but defeated, you know, the women have gone, everyone's scarpered, there's nothing left, and they can see the battlefield essentially being empty, they start to come down. But then Khalid bin Waleed, because he's on the right flank of the Quraysh army, it's said that he sort of hid down here, looking at potential weaknesses. Then when he sees the fact that the archers have left their post, he comes and he attacks the mount where the archers are, kills all 10 of them, which we'll inshallah do later on. And then he establishes this vantage point, which is strategically key to the whole battle. So he captures that, calls on Ikrimah and the other Quraysh to come. So they turn and they come join the fight. And then as he's there, the Prophet ﷺ sees that Khalid's attacking, calls out to the Muslims. So he gives away his coordinates and his position, and then the Muslims, they have to retreat, and they come to try and protect the Prophet ﷺ. And amidst all this chaos, Khalid's men, and he's gathering more men around him, they then attack the Muslims here, they attack the Muslims there. The other Quraysh, some of the other Quraysh, they turn back when they see what's going on, and there is absolute chaos, and again a lot of Muslims die in that. So that's again important, just to highlight how the army is, how the battle is actually, how the lay of the land is important for the battle. So a couple of other stories just to mention. So we've got Abdullah bin Jubair bin Mut al-Ansari. He's on the top of the mountain, and the main, well, not the main, but one of the important stories, certainly in the first phase of the battle that we know happened in the first phase. There's a few specific instances. One is that Hamzah bin Abdul Muttalib, he was actually martyred in the first phase. Most of the deaths of the Muslims happened in the next phase, when after Khalid takes them by surprise, and then there's chaos, and that's where there's the heavy defeat. But in the first phase, there's only a handful of people that we know who were martyred. Hamzah bin Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, someone that the Prophet ﷺ was very fond of, was very dear to him. He was martyred, and again, you know, Hamzah's, I mean, he's known as the Sayyid of the Shaheed, the chief of the martyrs. I mean, he fought really bravely in the Battle of Badr, and obviously in Uhud, because the biographers of the Seerah, they've sort of listed all the people that the Muslims killed in the first phase of the battle. So, you know, amongst the Muslims that had the highest tally, you've got Hamzah, Abu Dujana, and Ali. So that these people, you know, were inflicting a lot of damage, and they were obviously the ones that, you know, who were able to do the focused fighting. So Hamzah, you know, he's there with his ostrich feather again, and he's, you know, fighting bravely. But then he's killed in a very cowardly fashion by Wahshi bin Harb. Now, he was an Abyssinian slave, and essentially what had happened was that Hamzah had killed someone called Nusaybah bin Adi, And Ayman bin Adi was related to Mutim bin Adi. And we've talked about Mutim. He's the one who gave the Prophet ﷺ protection when he came back from Taif. And the Prophet ﷺ even praised him at the end of the Battle of Badr by saying, look, if Mutim was still alive, and he said one phrase to me, I would have given all these filth, these prisoners of war, to Mutim, without any questions. So, Wahshi was the slave of Jubair ibn Mutim, so Mutim ibn Adi's son, and Mutim's brother Ayman, he was killed by Hamza in the Battle of Badr. So before marching out to Badr, the Jubair ibn Mutim, he said to the Wahshi that if you kill Hamza, so Hamza had a bounty on his head, if you kill him, essentially I will give you freedom. So that's essentially what Wahshi did. He took his spear with him with the sole intention of killing Hamza, and then he's got his freedom. So Jubair's, and this story is related by Wahshi. Much later on, he's sort of, there's a couple of Sahabi, they come meet Wahshi as he's settled in one of the sort of outskirts of the Muslim empire. He's very old at this stage. I mean, he's had a reputation for not always sticking to the Sunnah. There's some reports that he was an alcoholic, or he used to drink alcohol a lot, and then he was punished publicly for that many a time. In fact, Umar ibn al-Khattab would say that he knew that the killer of Hamza wouldn't go unpunished in this world, and maybe this is the qadr of Allah. But anyway, Wahshi undertook this deed as a non-Muslim. He was an Abyssinian slave, and later on he became a Muslim. But he recounts this story when these two Sahabi, or these two students, came to Wahshi to ask him specifically about how he killed Hamza, and then he goes, look, I will recount the story as I did word for word to the Prophet ﷺ. So he says, look, I was a slave working for Jubair ibn Mutim, whose paternal uncle Ayman was killed in the Battle of Badr. So when the Quraish marched out to Uhud, Jubair said to me, look, if you kill Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet, you shall be freed. Okay, so I marched with the people to Uhud, and then he goes, look, I'm very good with the spear. I'm an expert person with the javelin. I can, that's his expertise. So then he said, look, when the two parties fought, I set out seeking Hamza. And again, Hamza's a big fellow. He's got the ostrich feather. He's in the thick of fighting. He's very recognizable. So I saw him amidst the people. He was like a white and black striped camel, striking severely with his sword, and no one could stand in his way. This is Wahshi's own testimony, saying, look, he was basically cutting down everyone, in his path. By Allah, I was getting ready, and I was trying to seize the fit opportunity to spear him. So I would hide sometimes behind a tree or a rock, hoping that I could get closer to him and to be within range. So again, he's just doing this by stealth. He's not, it's not face-to-face or armed combat. He's essentially just trying to take him out in a cowardly fashion, and he admits that. So he'd be hiding behind the rocks or the trees, and then at a moment I caught sight of someone called Nusaybah ibn Abdul Uzza, who was getting close to him. And then when Hamza saw Nusaybah, he shouted over to him, said, "Oh, come over here, you son of a so-and-so," because his mother used to, this is Nusaybah's mother, used to do female genital mutilation. FGM is what they call it now, but female circumcision. So then, with one stroke, he basically took a stroke of his sword, and it went. And Wahshi says it went so fast, it seemed as if he had missed Sibah, but then it basically his head came clean off. And then at that moment, as soon as Hamza had done that, he stepped out from behind the tree. So I balanced my spear and then shook it till I was happy with it, just getting the center of gravity right. And then I speared him, and it went into his stomach and came out between his legs. So Hamza's got his back towards Wahshi. Wahshi, throws the spear, gets through the sort of chinks where the armor were, and comes straight out from behind his back, straight out through his stomach, and then it's there sort of protruding, it said, between his legs. And then Hamza is obviously surprised by this. If he sees an enemy, he's sort of ready for it, but this is just something, from behind. And then he turns around, looks at Wahshi, and then he moves to try and come and confront Wahshi, even though he's got this spear, hanging out. But Wahshi says, but he was overcome by this wound, and then he fell, and then says, I left him with the spear inside him until he died. So once, obviously still afraid of Hamza, once he'd seen that Hamza had expired and was lifeless, he went over and he said, I came to him, I pulled out my spear and returned to camp where the Quraish were camped, and I stayed there and did not go out for Hamza was the only one I sought. I only killed him to get my freedom. So as soon as I got back to Makkah, I became a free man. So that's the sad story of Hamza, who was so dear to the Prophet, how he was killed. And then so Hamza was killed before Khalid bin Waleed launched the counter offensive. This was in the early portion of the battle. He was a marked man, and he was taken out like that. And then he was left there. We know that when the tide was against the Quraysh, they all ran away. And we talked last week about how even the women were hitching up their skirts, and you could see the anklets. They were running off. So Hind was one of those who ran off. But then Hind, she comes back later, and again, it's not a pleasant story, but we all know it, that she comes back deliberately looking on the battlefield for Hamza, finds Hamza, takes out her own knife or dagger, cuts the stomach of Hamza, takes out his liver, chews on the liver of Hamza and spits it out. And then it's also said that she cut off some of the fingers and toes of Hamza to make a necklace out of these. And it's also said in some other reports, we don't know if it's by her or by others, that Hamza's private parts were also mutilated. So this is disgusting mutilation. There's no need for this level of mutilation. It just goes to show the hatred that Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, the so-called queen amongst the Quraysh, the visceral hatred she had towards the Prophet ﷺ, towards the Muslims. And Allah knows best. Allah eventually guided both Hind and her husband Abu Sufyan to Islam after the opening of Makkah. So again, she will be these were crimes committed before Islam for her. So, Allah is the most bounteous, the most merciful, and we accept that. So, Hamza's body is there, all mutilated, and then Safiya's so this is much later on. Safiya's going towards the body. She's seeking out Hamza. She's brought two pieces of cloth to shroud him. Again, it's very emotional. We'll talk about it later on. And then Prophet ﷺ, he stops Safiya. He sends Zubair and says, "Look, stop that woman. I think it's Safiya." And she goes there, and Safiya sort of pushes her son away. And then he goes, "Look, she says, look, I've been ordered to stop you so you don't see the body of Hamza." And she goes, "Look, I know what's happened to Hamza. I still want to see him with my own eyes." And then he goes, "Look, the Prophet ordered me to stop you." And the Prophet, he later said that had it not been for Safiya's grief and the fact that it may have become sunnah for my people after me, in terms of they would imitate this action, what he would have done is he would have left the body of Hamza to decompose on the battlefield, so that the birds and the beasts would pluck him and take his body even further. So the mutilation would be done to such an extent, that the Hamza's honor would be raised by that, and then Allah would bring back Hamza and all his honor. So had it not been the fact that my people after me would have done that, and Safiya would have grieved even more to see that end, he would have left the body there. And then he said that in future battles, I will mutilate or take revenge from 30 of my enemy for each of our own. So again, the Prophet, he's really disturbed by this whole thing, what happened to Hamza, understandably. And then this is one of the places where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he then gently corrects the Prophet in Revelation. And he goes, look, it's better, again in translation, if you forgive your enemies. But if you must do something, you do as equal as is done to you. So the Prophet understood that he can't transgress the boundaries. And then after he received that revelation, the Prophet then made an absolute prohibition of the mutilation of the dead body in any way, shape or form. And there's an absolute, there's no allowance. This was an absolute prohibition in legal terms, that you are not allowed to mutilate the body, Muslims or non-Muslims. And again, this, I don't want to get into it now, but this is one of the bases for the fact that as Muslims we're not allowed to allow post-mortems. So when the body dies, and the coroner in this country, or not in Pakistan but in the UK and other places, they want to do a post-mortem, an inspection after death, post-mortem. In which case they will often, open up, dissect or mutilate the dead body. So that's prohibited. Likewise, there's the modern discussions around cadaveric organ donation. So whether it's permitted that once somebody has died, that they are allowed to donate their body organs. And again, obviously, to do that, you need to mutilate or cut or injure the dead body. So the prohibition of mutilation of the dead body partly stems from this instance. Again, that's absolute. So we'll let the scholars discuss that. So then, moving on from the sad assassination of Hamza, which was done in the initial battle when the Muslims are winning. The other one is of Hanzala. Hanzala, who was Ghaseel al-Malaika, who was washed by the angels. So just rewinding a little bit, on the day before, the Friday, after Jummah, after the Prophet ﷺ made the proclamation that they're going to march out to Uhud, there were a couple of people that wanted private audience with the Prophet ﷺ to ask them a couple of questions. One was Hanzala, come on to him in a second, and the other one was someone called Abdullah ibn Amr of Bani Salama. Now, Abdullah ibn Amr, he was one of the Khazraj, and he 3 years prior to this had gone out for the pilgrimage as a pagan, as a mushrik. He entered into the valley of Minna, where the pilgrims were, and there he was one of those who then became a Muslim, and he pledged allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ at the second pledge of Aqaba. And then 2 or 3 nights before the Battle of Uhud, Abdullah, he'd had a dream where a man came to him in his sleep, and he recognized him as one of the other Ansar called Mubashir. And Mubashir said to him, a few days you shall come to us. And so in his dream, Abdullah is saying, look, where are you? And then Mubashir says, in paradise. And over here we can do as we please. And then Abdullah's having a discussion with Mubashir and said, look, but weren't you killed in the Battle of Badr? And then Mubashir said, yes, even so, but then I was brought back to life. So the father of Jabir said the Prophet to Abdullah. Abdullah's telling him this story, so the Prophet replies, father of Jabir, this is martyrdom. So he explained what the dream was. It's a true dream. It's martyrdom. So Jabir's wife had recently died, and then he's got 1 son and 7 daughters, and then he doesn't want to leave. Obviously, both Jabir and Abdullah can't go to fight because they will leave their daughters, and Jabir is the eldest of the siblings. So both of them wanted to fight, but then the father said, look, my son, it's not meant that we should leave them, he meant the daughters, without a man to care for them. They are young and helpless, and I fear for them. So I shall go out with the messenger of Allah, just in case, hoping for martyrdom if God grants me that, in which case I leave them to your care. Obviously, Abdullah goes out and does become shaheed, and we'll talk about that later. And the other one who was waiting to talk to the Prophet ﷺ was Hanzala. Now, Hanzala, his father, we talked about before, was Abu Amir al-Fasiq, who was known previously as the monk. He tried to talk the Ansar out of battle, or to sort of withdraw. The Friday when they announced they're going to march out was actually Hanzala's wedding day, and his wedding had been sort of set some weeks earlier. He was going to marry his cousin Jamila, who's the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ubay, the leader of the hypocrites. So, war's been announced. He wants to go to war, but it's his wedding day, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to postpone his wedding. So he goes to the Prophet ﷺ specifically advised to say, what should I do? It's my wedding day, but also, I don't want to miss out on Uhud. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, celebrate your marriage, spend the night in Medina. So he had a special dispensation to stay at home, and then there's not going to be any fighting before sunrise, so he could then leave in the morning and come join the rest of the army, just find out how they'd gone. So that was the plan. So Hanzala, he was very brave in the fighting, and he was actually he targeted Abu Sufyan as part of his sort of strategic game plan. So he was advancing towards Abu Sufyan, but obviously Abu Sufyan as leader of the Quraish, he's not going to be unprotected, so he's got his own special guard protecting him. So as Hanzala, he sort of jumps in to try and strike Abu Sufyan, Hanzala gets stricken down by one of the Quraish, Shaddad bin al-Aswad, who killed him. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he's there in his sort of camp, and he sees Hanzala rise up, and the angels, well, the angels lift him up, and the angels are washing him or giving him ghusl, spiritual ghusl. And then, you know, he descends from that. And so then this is obviously strange. So he asked the Sahabi to go and speak to Hanzala's wife to find out what happened. So then, you know, she explained that basically they got married and they spent the night together. And then in the early morning, as he's getting ready to fight, praise Fajr, he's about to leave, his wife then clings on to him and, you know, doesn't want him to go. So then they have another intimate moment, and then he doesn't have time to do ghusl, to wash himself, and then he leaves for battle. And so the angels want to essentially spiritually cleanse him, you know, before battle, although the shaheed isn't washed when he's buried, because he's not actually dead, as it were. Slight change of angle because the sun is beating down. Anyway, the other couple of stories just to mention is one that we talked about last time. Quzman, who was a hypocrite, he was a munafiq. He was actually one of those who returned with Abdullah ibn Ubay when Abdullah withdrew his army. He got back to Medina. He had no intention of defending Islam. He was then goaded by the women folk in Medina, saying, well, you're a brave warrior, what are you doing here? There's a battle going on, call yourself a man. So he felt embarrassed. So then he put back on his armor, went back out to fight, and he fought very bravely, but he fought, you know, for his own people. He fought for this sort of bravado, to be known as a brave warrior. He didn't fight for Islam. And we said whenever they would mention the heroics of Quzman on the battlefield, the Prophet would say, "An-nar," you know, he is going to be in the hellfire. And then one of the people followed him, and they saw that actually when he got hit by an arrow, and that caused him a lot of pain, and essentially, you know, he couldn't bear that pain, and all the humiliation of whatever else was happening. So he just, you know, put his sword on the floor, you know, and sort of had it leaning into his stomach, and then he just fell on his sword and died. So, you know, he wasn't a shaheed. He just, you know, taken his own life like that. But, you know, he fought bravely. But that's the reason he fought. And again, we talked last time about, you know, the Prophet said in hadith that, you know, on the Day of Judgment, there are, you know, the first three people to be thrown into hellfire include the person who, fights valiantly on the battlefield. But then Allah says, why did you fight? He fought for bravery and for fame, not for the sake of Allah. He's cast into hellfire. You've got the Qari, who recites Qur'an, but he recites or teaches Islam. So people say, what a wonderful Qari or wonderful teacher he is. He does it for that fame. He doesn't do it for the sake of Allah. He gets thrown into hellfire. And then you've got the person who gives charity, but he gives a lot of charity, involved in charity works, but he does it so people will praise him as being generous. Again, flung into hellfire. So Quzman, fighting for the wrong reason, and into hellfire. And then we compared that with the story of Usairim. Now Usairim, he was an idol worshipper. He was one of the last idol worshippers, the mushrik, left in Medina. Once the Prophet had taken over Medina, after Battle of Badr, there was no more idolatry, which basically means there was no public worshipping of idols. Most idol worshippers had become Muslims, either openly or they were sort of munafiq. Okay, but he was one of these. He was known to be a pagan, so but obviously not doing any public acts of idolatry. So Usairim, he then sees Uhud completely quiet. There's no one there. He asks around the people, where's Sa'd bin Mu'adh? People say, like, he's at Uhud. Where's so-and-so? He's at Uhud. Where's so-and-so? He's at Uhud. And then he goes, well, if all the greatest of the city are in Uhud, what am I doing here? Okay, so then he puts on his armor, he accepts Islam, and then he goes out, walks over to Uhud to fight in the battle. He encounters the Muslims, and they say, look, hang on a second, you're a pagan. Well, we don't take help of the pagans. And he goes, no, I have become a Muslim. And they said, okay, fine. And then he joined the battle, and he fought fiercely, and he died. I mean, nobody asked his aqidah, nobody asked, how many times he's prayed, because he hadn't prayed at all. They accepted the fact that he said he's a Muslim, his heart had changed, and he fought, and he became shaheed. And the Prophet ﷺ said of him, he did very little, yet his reward was great. And alhamdulillah, so it was. He's what's his name? Abu Hurairah used to, in one of those trivial pursuit questions, used to test his students and say, look, do you know of any Muslim who entered Jannah without praying a single rak'ah of salah? And obviously this was Usairim, who became a Muslim after Fajr, died before the whole prayers. So he didn't have the opportunity to actually pray. And again, just contrasting these very two people. There's also the story of another person, Mukhaireek. Mukhaireek, he was from the Jewish people. And he, once war had been sort of announced on the Friday, he was extolling his people, the Jewish people, saying, look, we have to stick to the treaty. We've got, the treaty says we have to defend Medina, so let's go out and defend Medina. And then the Jews, they didn't want to fight, and they're just making excuses. And the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't specifically invoke the treaty before Uhud, again, because there was this tension between the Muslims and the Jewish people. We talked about what happened after Badr, so there's that ongoing tension. With following Banu Qaynuqa, and the Prophet probably knew that even if the Jewish tribes had entered, kept their part of the treaty, they would have may have gone back with Abdullah ibn Ubay, or their heart wouldn't be in the fighting. So he didn't even bother sending an emissary to the Jewish tribes to say, fulfill your treaty obligations. But this chap, Mukhaireek, he said, look, it's our duty to fight, and people kept refusing. And then on the Saturday, obviously it's the Sabbath, he goes to the people and they say, look, we can't do anything today, it's the Sabbath, we're prohibited from fighting. So then he gets very frustrated, he puts on his armor, and he tells his family, he picks up his sword, tells his family, look, if anything were to happen to me, give my property to Muhammad. And it said that he fought bravely. Some say it was purely through loyalty to the treaty. Some say he actually had become a Muslim. But there is that ambiguity. But anyway, the Prophet ﷺ said of Mukhaireek that he was the best of the Jews because he fulfilled his promise. And again, it can be interpreted in both ways. One is that he'd become a Muslim, and so from the Jewish people he was the best. And the others is that he died as a Jew, but he fulfilled his promise, which was there in the treaty. A couple of other stories to mention was that a couple of women. We know that later on that people from the house of Prophet were there tending to the wounded, but also there was Nusaybah. It's notable that she also came out to battle. She was a woman of the Khazraj, and all the lectures and talks about the great women of Islam, Nusaybah is always up there amongst the great. So Nusaybah, she was one of those two women who gave the second pledge at Aqaba. So she's a very early Muslim. Both her husband and two of her sons, her husband Ghaziyah and her two sons, were in the Battle of Uhud. So she'd woken up on the Saturday morning, and then she'd making the decision she's not going to stay back. All this fighting going on. So then she, fills her bottle with water, sets off for the battlefield, maybe with the intention of just helping out, nursing the wounded, etc., giving drink to the thirsty. But nonetheless, she took with her her bow, quiver of arrows, and her sword, just in case, and we'll come across the heroics of Nusaybah much later on in these huge heroics in defending Prophet ﷺ. So then she reached the battlefield. She asked people how, where they were. She got there without any difficulty. Not long after the battle had begun, and then she placed herself at the foot of the mountain where the Prophet ﷺ had taken up his position on relatively high ground, and was there as part of the group that was defending the Prophet ﷺ. The other one that we know of who joined the battle is the mother of Anas, and that's Sulaym. And again, she'd had the same idea initially as Nusaybah. She'd gone there with some water, to tend to the people, and then she also, behind the lines, the Muslim front lines in the safe zone, and she was joined by, there were two men of Muzayna, one of the Bedouin tribes to the west, who were both recent converts to Islam, and they'd entered into Medina. They found the place empty, these two Bedouins, and they found out that there was a battle about to happen, so they hadn't come with the intention of fighting, but when they'd seen that Medina was under attack, it was half empty, they immediately set out to join the army, the Muslim ranks of the army. They sort of agreed to the Prophet, drew their swords, and then they dived in. And so we talked how the initial Muslim phase was one of victory. Things were under control, apart from obviously Hamza being targeted. The archers were holding fast to their position. They were preventing Khalid bin Waleed and his cavalry from attacking. There would be a volley of arrows every time that they went, and they could see now the battlefield was emptying out, and the Muslims had chased the Quraish away categorically. Abdullah ibn Zubair, said that his father had said, "By Allah is watching the servants of Hind bint Utbah and her women friends fleeing with their garments gathered up. No one was there to prevent us from capturing them." And in another version, Al-Bara bin Azib mentioned in Bukhari that when we fought them, they fled, and their women could be seen fleeing the mountains with their ankles and legs revealed. These are some of the other mountains at the back of the Quraishi camp. So then the archers, they started arguing amongst themselves. Of the 50, they're saying, look, the battle's won. But Abdullah ibn Jubair says, look, no, we've been given express and explicit instructions. We have to stay here, no matter what happens, until the Prophet ﷺ personally sends for us a message to come down. But they're seeing, they've got the vantage point. They can see that the battle from their point of view is over. The Quraysh are gone, they're scattered. 3,000 of them just completely vanished. And so they made the fatal mistake of then arguing amongst themselves for the worldly goods, and one or two then went down, and the others, and slowly by slowly, 4/5 of them had left their position, leaving only 10. Abdullah ibn Amr said, I'm going to stay here, and so they're arguing amongst themselves, over a course of maybe half an hour or an hour, but they can see the distribution of the spoils, and they can see people collecting the spoils, and then Shaitan tempts them, and they miss out sort of doubly. They they hadn't realized that actually the spoils of war, they're distributed equally. So it doesn't matter if they're collecting it or not. What happens is that the personal armor of the people you kill, you take their property. But the general armor that's there and the general spoils, it's collected by everyone, put in a big pile in front of the Prophet, and the Prophet then divides it out. A fifth here, 4/5, and that 4/5 gets divided amongst them, cavalry and infantry, but it gets divided out equally amongst them. It's not what you can pick up is yours. Okay, so they miss out because they didn't get that was the fatal mistake that caused the defeat. So they both lost the battle, they lost their spoils of war, and they lost an element of the akhirah because of that, potentially, all because they wanted dunya. Their niyah changed from victory and pleasing Allah. Their niyah changed to getting the spoils of war, getting the things of the dunya. So that's the point where Khalid sees his opportunity, sees that the mount is only guarded by 10, calls on the people, they takes his cavalry, he attacks the mount first, kills all 10 of them, right? Abdullah ibn Jubair and the other 9 are all killed and decimated, because Khalid knows he has to control. That is the strategic vantage point. He controls that. He's now able to control the battlefield. Then he calls on the others, and word goes out to Ikrimah as well, bring his cavalry, and they come and they swing round behind the mount now, and they're able to now attack the Muslims. And then as they attack the Muslims, complete and utter chaos. And as part of the chaos, some of the Quraysh see that actually the Muslims are now under attack. The voices, the drum beats, whatever, are being called. There's a pagan woman called Umrah bint Alqamah. So Umrah, she then rushes. She picks up the standard, the flag of the Quraysh. She hoists it up and waves it around so that the Quraysh can see that actually the battle hasn't been lost, and they start to regroup. So the Muslims just don't know what's going on, okay, and they're caught in this complete chaos. And the Prophet, he's the first one who can see this, so he sees it from his vantage point, slightly elevated vantage point. You can see Khalid bin Waleed coming. What does he do? Does he go up the mountain? Does he retreat? Abandon things, like the rest of his army, and protect himself because his life is very important? Or does he call out to the other people to try and rally around him? Now the danger of that is that he raises his voice, the Muslims will hear, and the non-Muslims will hear, the Quraysh will hear, and they will know where he is. He's given up his coordinates, they will attack him. So he's faced with this decision, and the Prophet, being the Prophet, does he puts aside his own fear, and then he starts calling out, to the Muslims. He raises his voice and says, "O slaves of Allah, behind you, take your armor." So, he's given away his position. He's alerting the Muslims. The Muslims see that amongst all this chaos and panic, and they start to sort of gather whatever they can and brace themselves for the fight. The Quraysh now know that they can have the upper hand. Khalid's got the control of the mount of the archers. He's got his cavalry now charging and attacking the Muslims from behind the ranks, and attacking the Prophet ﷺ and his group. So there's a pincer movement, as it were. The Prophet ﷺ obviously with the mountain behind him. So then in this complete sort of chaos, you have a lot of the Muslims being killed now. So you've got the father of Hudhayfa al-Yaman. He gets killed by friendly fire, essentially, because of the chaos. Then you've got lots of other Muslims being killed. Then the rumours of the Prophet ﷺ dying because Musab ibn Amr is killed. So all this chaos, leads to more chaos. And the Prophet ﷺ trying to gather, he's only surrounding himself by 10 people, right? And they get struck down one by one. But inshallah, next week we'll talk about that in more detail in terms of this complete chaos. We'll go through the other isolated stories of the people who become shaheed, and more specifically how they start targeting the Prophet ﷺ, how he's being defended, and which leads to the most critical time in his life where he could almost facing death. Obviously the angels are going to protect him, but he's almost facing death. There's only one or two people, or 2 or 3 people between him and the swords of the Quraish on the battlefield. And we'll talk about how he personally gets injured. He's got his teeth knocked out. He's got his helmet digging into his cheeks, and the arrows in his cheeks. So inshallah we'll talk about that next week. So we'll finish there. So do remember us in your du'as and the ummah. Do subscribe, do send in comments or questions, and I'll try to answer them. So yes, on Facebook, WhatsApp, or YouTube. So we'll finish there inshallah. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير everybody. Assalamu alaikum.